Divya Sheta, student at Department of English, Maharaja Krishna Kumar PG, Bhavnagar University. On the occasion of celebrating Teachers' Day, I am getting opportunity to teach virtually. On this occasion, I am going with the topic of Robert Frost, a very famous poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowing Evening poem. About the poet Robert Frost. Robert Frost is a celebrated American poet. He had a great mastery of American colloquial speech and made realistic depictions of the real rural life. His great work in poetry mostly included settings from the rural life in England in early 20th century. He used poem to examine complex philosophical and social themes. During his life, individuals honored and at many times quoted him due to his work and he received four Pulitzer Prizes. His accomplishment in poetry. His first two collections publications happened while he was in England. One of the first collections, A Boy With, published in the year 1915, shows a sign of the many themes and techniques that Frost developed further. Most of the poems in the collection employ an archaic Victorian fashion. In the collection, he never applies the conversational style, which he highly uses in his later works. Most poetry reviews, including Ezra Pound, reviewed the work positively. His second collection, North Boston, America and England as North Boston, commented his reputation in both America and England as a poet with significant talent. The well-known modernist poet Ezra Pound praised Robert Frost as artistic vigor and the tone of honesty and irony in the poems, whose per- pervasive humor contains a touch of the sinister. His poem "The Road Not Taken", published in the year 1961 Mountain Interval Collection, became one of the anthologized and popular works in the America's literature, although critics complained that people misunderstood it. The poem is taken as a celebration of individuality when its most likely interpretation is regretful work. New Hampshire, published in the year 1924, confirmed Frost as one of the significant poetic voices of the 20th century. He won a Pulitzer Prize for the collection. The collection contains his most popular poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowing Evening. Frost claimed of having written the poem after working for another poem for a whole night. The poem uses imagery of a snowbound frost and a long journey to creating a metaphor of an individual struggling against nature. Here is the poem. In the poem, there are four stanzas. The first stanza is whose woods these are, I think I know, to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweet of easy wine and downy play. Here we here we come to know that what poet, where is poet, and what is complexity in poet's mind. My little horse. Here by seeing the word my little horse, that we know that poet or speaker is not going alone, but with his Horse, my little horse, must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Third stanza is he gives his harness bells a shake. Perhaps in this stanza, poet speak about his horse or what horse thinks. He gives his harness bells a shake. His house is in the village though. By seeing this line that his house, that we can assume that here his house perhaps something third person which poet would like to tell about him. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. Fourth stanza is the woods are lovely, dark, and deep. Here is the famous line of his poems that the woods are lovely, and there is the pause. Lovely, but there we can read but in silently. The woods are lovely, but dark and deep. Dark and deep. So here, dark and deep and lovely. These words seems contradictory. That woods are lovely, but woods are also dark and deep. But I have promised to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. The rhyme of the poem is AABA, BCBB, CDCC, DDDD. And the meter is iambic pentameter. Tetrameter. Explanation. The speaker thinks, very first stanza is explained that the speaker thinks about who owns the woods that he or she is passing through and is fairly sure of knowing the landowner. However, the owner's home is far away in the village and thus he is physically incapable of seeing the speaker forced to watch the snow fall in the forest. Second stanza explains that the speaker thinks his or her house must find it strange to stop so far from any signs of civilization. Indeed, they are surrounded only by the forest and a frozen lake on the longest night of the year. Third stanza explains that the horse shakes the bells on its harness, as if asking if the speaker has made a mistake by stopping. The only other sound besides the ringing of these bells is that of the wind and falling snowflakes, which the speaker links to the feathers of goose down. Last stanza explains that the speaker finds the woods very alluring, drawn both to their darkness and how vast and all encompassing they seem. However, the speaker has obligations to fulfill elsewhere. Thus, though he or she would like to stay and rest, the speaker knows there are many more miles to go before that will be possible. Themes that we can read that nature versus society. In the explanation that we can assume that speaker might be observe or might be live with nature and perhaps speaker speaker is speaker out from the society and wants to out from the society and the rules and regulations and wants to enjoy his or her individuality. Second thing, we can read that social obligation versus personal desire. That is also connected with nature versus society. Nature versus society, we can include that environment things and civilization in the in a city that we can read that social obligation versus personal desire, that what society think about me and what I needed for my life, that is perhaps included in the poem. Third thing, we can read that hesitation and choice. That perhaps that between that social obligation, between choosing what society thinks, what my desire, perhaps that between that hesitation, one speaker can be hesitation. That in the poem we can also feel that speaker's hesitation and what he or she he or she's desire or what about that choice. Last theme that we can read that the journey of life and the distractions. So in the life that there are many distractions, there are many ways, but what we need, what speaker need, that in his or her life, that in which direction he wants to go, either nature calls him or her, either society's regulation or rules, that can be three symbols, like wood and sweets. Would perhaps we can interpret that very hard thing, and after hammering or after cutting very harshly, one can shape. We can see that our house are made from woods very beautifully. That things that we can observe. Interpretation. First and largely interpretation that can be read by several critics or readers, that about speaker. That here we can assume that speaker write from I, and using or he will not see me, that line that we're using, we can interpret that speaker is a poet himself. And then we can also interpret that speaker of this poem is anonymous and does not have a specified gender. He or she seems to be some sort of traveler or business person who is passing through the woods and route to uphold certain promises he or she has made. He or she may be trespassing. That perhaps the speaker is just a traveler, that is traveling through the traveler through the forest, and he what experiencing and then wrote in the poem. The speaker also seems to find some freedom. That freedom is perhaps mostly read in the one can read in the poem, that perhaps the speaker finds his or her freedom in the woods, aware that the landowner cannot actually see them stopping there. So, landowner, that we can read society, then woods we can read as speaker himself or herself. The speaker seems torn between his or her obligations to others and an individual. As we can discuss in the themes, that wish to stay and rest among nature. That here very first and very very strong voice comes, that speaker wants to stay among nature. Some interpretation of this poem suggests that the horse is actually the narrator, that in the stanza that we can read that my little horse, that his harnessed bells, all these connections that we it assumes that somewhere speaker is interpret that horse perhaps thinks this whole thing, and this poem suggests that the horse is actually the narrator, or at least is in the same mindset as the narrator, echoing his thought. So, what horse thinks is echoing his thought in speaker's mind also. Literary context, that we can see that Frost's work was also very attuned to traditional and classical poetry, and in this way resisted the explosion of free verse that would come to dominate modernist poetry. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening is written in rubaiyat form, made famous in the English-speaking world by Edward Fitzgerald's translation of the 12th century Persian poet Omar Khayyam. The poem also nods towards Dante's use of terza rima, another form of interlocking chain rhyme. Historical context, if we can see that the poem was written just several years after the conclusion of World War One. So there are chaos around a poet's life, or in which region poet lived, which had forced Frost to move from England. So this World War One, this chaos forced Frost to move England, and be or will he will be his strongest desire to live peacefully, where he briefly lived and back to United States. And England he briefly lived, and then he back to United States. Though his poetry never overtly dealt with war, the devastating conflict cast a huge shadow over much of modern literature and art at the time. Poets found themselves grappling with the place of the individual in a world that perhaps lacked meaning or goal. Such questions can be seen indirectly in this poem, that whether it is the speaker's meditation on solitude, or the more foreboding and ominous symbol of despair that may be suggested in the powerful draw of the woods. Here are my word citation. Thank you, friends.